My name is Helga Teiwes. I'm in my home in Tucson, and today is October 22nd, 2021. Particularly my mother was a vivid photographer, and they also had an 8 millimeter camera, movie camera, which my father mainly used. So I grew up with it. But then comes the war, and that all fell apart anyway. But then when I actually wanted to be a cinematographer. And when I had made that Abitur, that is the end exam for our high school in Germany, was as good as 2 years of college here. Because I made a, no, I'm bragging. I made a BA in art history here because I couldn't get it cheaper. Working there, I got tuition off. So they gave me 2 years. But yeah, it still took me 4 years here because I was full-time working and could only go once a week. So anyway, after that, I had the fantastic idea. I'm a dreamer, huh? I wanted to be behind a movie camera. I wanted to make movies. And so I talked to a guy, and that was really showing in New York. I had a similar case. That he said, you're a woman. You will end up in the cutting room. You will never be behind the camera. And I just thought I'd go and turn his neck, you know. So I had, fortunately, my mother knew Hemke Winter. That's her name. Erna Hemke Winter was a double name because she was together with another woman, but they split up, I guess, or what. She kept the name because they were famous. And put me there in an apprenticeship for 3 years. That's the old way, the old guild way. 3 years and you make journeyman, and another 4 years and you can make your master, and then you can open your own business. And that is still a good way of doing it. Technically, because you really work, as a journeyman particularly, you have to do everything that you do later on in life. And then you have to learn that on top of it, you have to go to school, partly, and learn how to run a business. And that I never was good in. That's why I never dared to open my own business, and it was always salaried. But I made it. Yeah. Thanks to the good Southwestern people here. Yeah. And so I was with her 7 years. But no, she always had apprentices, and a school friend of mine happened to be there a year earlier than I, because I lost a year, 45, during the war. And Elsbeth didn't. She stayed in Düsseldorf and went straight through. So she was and I was surprised to find her at Hemke Winter as an apprentice too. And we kind of laughed about this and all this. Oh, you asked me before what she photographed. She photographed everything. She was known for her children photography and portraiture. That was her stronghold, I would think, but she was also a very good industrial photographer. We would go into factories and holding big lights, hot lights, and sometimes there was dripping down there from when there was moisture. I mean, Düsseldorf has a lot of rain. Everything is pretty moist, and hitting the bulbs, they would explode and stuff like that. Or we had to walk around with a light, you know, and light that way. So she did all that. It was amazing. The woman was way ahead of her time. And that's how I learned, because as I said in the beginning, if you know the technique, all right, you can apply it to any subject matter, I think. And that's what I did in Snaketown. I had no idea about archaeology, but I thought it fascinating and just applied the photographic technique. Two days after my 30th birthday. Yeah, because I have been through a lot. I mean, I wanted to see the free world. So I was in New York, Manhattan, and I had to find a job and fought myself through. But fashion photography I had never really done. And I ended up the first year just doing constantly 8x10 prints of actors and actresses who needed those to get well known all around and all this stuff. So it was just a very, very boring job and paid $48 a week. And I lived in Mount Vernon, so the first thing is that I cut out the railroad and moved into Manhattan. And that was not very easy because, again, you can only pay for a certain amount, and those things had cockroaches galore. And why, you know Manhattan?
I do.
Yeah.
I was born in Brooklyn.
But yeah, so I moved around a little bit. And I even had a job with Cartier on Fifth Avenue. I was an assistant photographer to the photographer. And that didn't work out too well. And I thought, after 4 years, and I had learned on the side in the evenings how to retouch transparencies, big transparencies that the people had to use in, help me, what is this word? But when you want to sell something, clothing or what, yeah, you had to make the waist thinner, you had to change the background or something like that. So that was a good business. But the people I worked with, for some reason, they went under for reasons I don't understood, and went to their competition, and that went good for a while. But then I thought, this is not enough. I don't want to. I'm an outdoors person, and there in Manhattan, all you have to see the houses pick up, and you might see the sky when you're lucky. But I made a small inheritance of my godmother who had died, and I bought a Volkswagen. One of these little ones, what would we,
Bug?
a bug, right. And so I put stuff in the storage and packed up and went on my way to see friends, German friends in Denver. I had met them on a previous trip. I went by railroad to the Grand Canyon and met them there when they had a 5-year-old girl when we all went down the Bright Angel Trail. They went all the way down. I stayed there in the middle. What is it called anyway? And so it was a good friendship. And they always said, if you ever come west, come and visit with us. So I stayed with them in the summer of '64. I found work, and just menial work, filing papers away in the shop, just so I had something. And then I also worked with what I had learned, the retouching, the transparency retouching thing, which was very chemically. We had to bleach things out and then put colors in there, which in Denver nobody knew. And after I had made $300, I said, okay, I take off, because my friends talked about cliff ruins. There was a German couple, and they were very interested in the Southwest and showed me pictures of cliff ruins, and I said, I have to see that. And so I did, and I went to Mesa Verde, and they were just through with Wetherell Mesa. The ranger had given a campfire talk, and I got all enthusiastic and went the next day to the visitor center, and they told me I have to talk to Francis Pinkley. Does that name ring a bell with you? No. You?
Yeah.
Where-
I know
where-
that name. I never met this person, but I know the name.
Yeah, her father was an archaeologist of renown. Yeah. And she said, yeah, well, sorry, if you like to work outdoors and work, do this kind of work, but we just closed up. It was finished, and National Geographic had sent their photographers. But she suggested I should go either to Santa Fe, what is it there? There is an archaeological outfit, and or to Flagstaff and talk to Ned Denson at the museum, which I did because I had been the year before in Flagstaff. Yeah, and he said he has no way to employ me, but I should go down to Tucson and talk to Dr. Howery, because he's putting a staff together for Snaketown excavation. And so I came down here, and it was hotter than hell on the road, and I had all windows open in the little bug, and drove 80 miles an hour. Ned Danson had arranged, rather the secretaries had arranged to see Dr. Howery on the 6th of July. And I think it was at 10 o'clock or somewhere. And so I saw him. I stayed on Miracle Mile on one of those wonderful places. I had no idea at that time what that meant or anything. So, and I don't know, Emil later on said, yeah, that he was struck by my enthusiasm to work outdoors and on a dig, on an excavation. He didn't even ask if I had any idea, if I knew anything about archaeology. And I had no samples with me, and I promised to send him something, because I mentioned I had been at Kitzil and Vetarakin on my way from Denver to come down. And he was interested, that particular Kitzil. So that's what I did. I went back and sent him pictures, copies of what I had done. And another hurdle that I had to overcome was when he asked, are you an American citizen? And I said, no, I'm not. And he said, well, that is a little bit difficult. But he arranged it that I, as an outlander, as a foreigner, can work there. So So then in October, I went down and we met at Snaketown in that empty day school where the staff was staying there. And that's how it started. Most of them knew each other, but I, of course, didn't know anybody. But life is an adventure, you know. Yeah, in '66 I became a citizen. I had to wait 6 years at that time. I don't know how it is now, but I had to give up my German citizenship. I tried to keep it and now they can keep them. And they wouldn't give it back to me. I had to get the job at the museum. Otherwise I wouldn't have. Maybe later, but not at that point. Whatever they found. House floors and holes in the ground, the stashes, what they call stashes, when they found these buried, broken pieces of pottery. Some were strictly incense burners, and others were just pottery sherds, and one was with figurines. So they seemed to be the same subject matter, but they were purposely broken and then buried. And yeah, and whatever there, lots of trenches with all the striations. I would say he was the best teacher anybody could ask for. And I tried to renew my memory in his book. I read for the last several days a little bit in there, and I had never done that before. And I admired not only him as a person, but his writing. Did you ever read any of that in that book? It's amazing. It is, I don't know, wonderful. The German connection, yes, because he thought his parents were rather German, but he was not a Mennonite. Hulda, his wife, was more of that because she was the daughter of a Mennonite priest or whatever you call them. I don't know. Yeah. So she was very strict, but she was, and frugal, but she was wonderful. They were both, they took me in as if I'm their daughter. So it was very good. Yeah. I loved them both. Mm. Yeah, no, he probably thought that I was so enthusiastic that I wanted to work on an excavation outdoors and learn all that he thought, well, let's try her. But if that wouldn't have worked out, the idea didn't even come. I had to do it, and I had to climb up that height ladder all the time and balance there a 4x5 camera with holders, open up, and oh God. Yeah. But I did it. He had still some money left in the grant because he needed photographs in the studio of the artifacts. And I did those for about half a year. Then the museum kicked in, half and half that he still paid in the museum. And then finally, I found out that the museum didn't have a photographer. Those were only graduate students who worked hours sometimes. And I said, there is so much work. And I talked to Emil about that, and he said, go to Dr. Thompson and ask him if he doesn't consider a full-time photographer, and I did. 29 years. Yeah, I mean, I don't know how old you are, but I came into my 50s. That's very hard for a woman to find a job. And I thought, I have a good job. I loved to work with Indians. And I didn't mind to make the long trips and do all this. So the pay wasn't tremendous, but I stayed. I even bought a little house on Edison, just north of the university and just south of Grant, yeah. So it was a good location. I could go home for lunch, call my cat home and they'd eat something, and that was a wonderful life. Because it started at Snaketown. We had a crew of 26 Akimel Indians, and I cannot remember how it came about that Leonard Stone was his name, a young guy, kind of skinny, but he introduced me to his wife, Pat. And they had already at least 8 children or more. In the end, they had 14 children. And no, I liked them, and they took me in. I mean, it was mutual that I would come from Tucson all the way to Snaketown on weekends and spend hours with them on one day, bring little gifts to the children, for instance, in Christmas. And it was just about 3 years ago, we celebrated the anniversary of both parents' deaths. They died within 2 days. First she, and then the next day he. And that was Edward. He came to me. I would not have recognized almost any of them, except Colleen, the oldest girl. And Edward said, God, it was so terrific when you brought us gifts for Christmas. We never got gifts. You know, there were too many of them. They didn't have the money. I didn't realize that then. If I would have realized that and knew that, maybe I wouldn't have done it. But Pat never said anything. She was happy that they were lucky. So, yeah, it was a good time. Branched out, for instance, to the Tohono O'odham. You see, that is, I don't know how the young Germans probably are that way, the way I was. But my generation, it was common. There was an author in the 19th century who wrote adventure stories. And his name was Karl May. Have you heard of that name? The Germans all know it. And because children as soon as they can read, up into their puberty time, I think, but in those few years, Karl May was what everybody read, because it's full of adventure and exploring and things like that. He also was in the Near East with ta-da, there they go again. The people who, not Afghanistan, Kurdistan, yeah. And he was supposedly here, but he never was. He never was in those places. They must have read very good reports, for instance, of the Southwest, because when I went to Tupai and had the Indian Daniel with a pack horse just to pack my little rucksack. I came there spending a long weekend, and And the horse, it is an 8-mile, have you ever been there? It's an 8-mile hike in there, and then a horse is appreciated, but your popo will hurt when you get there. And I looked around and I said, that is Karl May. That's exactly how he prescribed the landscape. That was amazing to me. So it was, this is a kind of prepared in a way. And he had these fantastic Indians, the Winnetou. I think he was supposed to be an Apache that was very good, and Old Shatterhand, and he was a white guy, and they went together on adventures. So I grew up with Indians. It's silly, but anyway, that's what stimulated me. And then I started on weekends to drive my car into the Tohono Reservation and made friends there. But then I did this for about 2 years, and then it started that I could do this for the museum. I talked about it, and Emil and also I think Dr. Thompson said, yeah, that would be a good idea to make a record. But then the university, I did it for the university, not for myself anymore. And I had to drive a university car and had to get permission from the tribe. So by the time when I had my own car, I could pack the equipment from the museum the day before in there and take off. Now I had to go to pick up the car, pick up the equipment, and was out in cells at noon, and then wait for the permission, sometimes an hour or even longer. So I had no time really left to travel to the various pueblos, villages, and see my friends and work. It just didn't pay anymore. And then on my own, I started to work with the Navajos. I made a book together with a German archaeologist, and we made a book, Navajo. Lindig is his name. I think he's still alive. He's my age. So I drove around in the north, the Navajo, and I also hiked there. I was with their Southern Arizona Hiking Club, and there was one guy, Eber Glendenning, funny guy, but he could just take you anywhere and find his way out. And we backpacked in the Navajo country, in those canyons. And so I got to get those Indians to know, mainly for the book. And then I forgot when I started to work with a Hopi. Anyway, I worked first with the Kachino doll carvers, and that spilled over into what the women did, basketry, and started with silversmithing and pottery making. But I only could do 2 sufficiently, and that was the Kachino doll carvers and the basket weavers. But I made wonderful friendships. Yeah, great friendships. And the Apaches, yeah, I photographed the so-called puberty ceremony. They don't coming of age ceremony, at least 2 or 3 times for the museum and 1 for myself. So in various places in San Carlos and White River. And made friends there too. Yeah. It was great. Yeah, I cannot really remember. In Snaketown, they gave me a 35 millimeter camera. I can't remember what it was. For me, that was the first time that I used some, but we needed some color pictures so that we had uh, dias? No, that's a German word, right? Slides. So I did that and was pretty proud of that I could handle that. Um, of course, I always had to be sent in. So when I took the color pictures, I had to wait at least a week or longer before I saw did it come out or not. And the black and white, they gave me a graphic, something graphic 4x5 camera. And that was very helpful. I like that format because it gives you a pretty large negative. The resolution is perfect. I hate to say that, but and I talked to my colorman here. He's totally digital, and I am untotal, totally digital. And he says, no, that digital is better. And I said, no, I don't think so. A good negative, you cannot beat it. And then he finally, I said, this isn't in focus. I know this is in focus. I'm working with him right now on things. And he said, oh, that went through that and that computer. So the more you give these things in another generation through computers, you lose resolution, which makes sense. I mean, we do to us with film. You know, if you print from a negative and then re-photograph that print, you get into more and more generations and you lose the resolution. So I was happy with the 4x5 and I developed it and made nice big prints sometimes. But when I needed, like, Emil arranged from the Air Force to get into a flight so he get some aerial pictures. And they didn't let me in there. So he had to go. And I see a picture in whatever I found that he has that graphic 4x5 in his hand to get in there. I said, Emil. And I did the same thing in a helicopter. And I had that on the first flight with a helicopter. I had that with me, and I say, "Bist verrückt? You can only use a certain shutter speed, which is much too slow to be up there, you know, particularly with a big format." And so that didn't come out. And so the second time, and I had my Rollei with me. I always had that as a second camera. And I think I took the little one too, the 35 millimeter. But so most of those aerial pictures are with my Rollei Flex. Yeah, what is that? 6 by 6 centimeters is 2.5 by 2.5, something like that. Yeah. It's a wonderful camera, but you cannot exchange lenses. You're stuck with one, what do you call it in English? Brennweite. One lens. Yeah. So. Yeah, one is with Hopi Kachinadol carvers, which were it's mainly, the photographs are late 70s and the 80s. And that generation now is overcome by younger ones who I don't know. But I understand it still sells. That book is still selling. And the basket one is not so good selling, even so I think it is a better book. The text is better, the pictures are better, and it's a larger format. But it's interesting to find out what people are actually interested in. I mainly did it and talked to the artists, and I said, I want you to be more famous. I want to have the white people know about your art. But it didn't work out that way, not with a basketry. And it is a lot of work to get a good basket together. So they can ask a lot of money, but not many people can pay it. So that's why that I don't know. Some pictures are museum. They have the copyright, but to most of them I have. I would take vacation time. But I have to say, whenever I worked for the museum on that too. That's right, because Emil gave the money to the museum that I could travel up there. That's how it was. Yeah, because Emil thought the museum should have these images. And then Ray Thompson said, we don't have travel money. They had travel money when they wanted to go someplace, but not much, I guess. So good old Emil again gave from his money. Yeah. Yeah, there was an exhibit in 2003, I think it was. Yeah. No, that was overall of my career, I guess. Yeah. Which was very nice. Yeah. And that even traveled. I approached them because I thought they're associated with ASM. ASM had thousands of my stuff. They don't need any more. And it just happened to be that there was, her name was Sharon. I forgot her last name. She's not there anymore. But I have a feeling she wanted a feather in her cap to get that collection. So I gave it to them. Yeah, I thought they have to have a housing somewhere when I'm gone. And I went when in 18, yeah, when we were on the East Coast with Archaeological Conservancy. With those trips, I like to go with Michael. They're nice people. And we looked at early American houses in Annapolis and other places. And from there on, I said, we're so close in Virginia, I want to go to Roanoke and see Winston's museum. By searching, going from photographer to photographer, searching for a job, I came to this guy who photographed the last steam engines on the East Coast. His name is Winston Winston Link. Do you know about him? And his story is something else. Yeah. He married the wrong woman. She took $1 million out of him because he could make money with these railroad trips. And there's a museum in Roanoke, Virginia, where we went. And it is so kind that they made an old railroad station for passengers. Now they had no passenger trains anymore. And they make a museum for him there. Yeah, it's nice. Only to then, the Blue Ridge Freeway is, not freeway, whatever, is up there. And I hired a car to get us up there for a day. And that guy had a cough. And I knew immediately, I get this. I'm not that pimply, but there I knew I got it. And I did. I came back with pneumonia. And the next day when we came back to Washington, D.C., I had taken that day to go to the Smithsonian and see how they have my pictures, how they're doing. And they were very kind and very nice. But I was so sick. I didn't ask the right questions. And let me see that, and let me see that. I let it all go. And oh yeah, no, that is all old stuff that I did, just to boost myself up. So he's making a portfolio for me. I never had one really. I had some prints, yeah, but so what? No, I mean, when we are working, we always have projects, no? And now having just a household project, it's coming out of my ears. Yeah. Most of them never get ended, yeah.